Development economics is a branch of economics which deals with economic aspects of the development process in low-income countries. Its focus is not only on methods of promoting economic development, economic growth and structural change, but also on improving the potential for the mass of the population, for example, through health and education and workplace conditions, whether through public or private channels. Development economics involves the creation of theories and methods that aid in the determination of policies and practices and can be implemented at either the domestic or international level. This may involve restructuring market incentives or using mathematical methods such as intertemporal optimization for project analysis, or it may involve a mixture of quantitative and qualitative methods. Unlike in many other fields of economics, approaches in development economics may incorporate social and political factors to devise particular plans. Also, unlike many other fields of economics, there is no consensus on what students should know. Different approaches may consider the factors that contribute to economic convergence or non-convergence across households, regions, and countries. Theories of development economics. Mercantilism. The earliest Western theory of development economics was mercantilism, which developed in the 17th century, paralleling the rise of the nation-state. Earlier theories had given little attention to development. For example, scholasticism, the dominant school of thought during medieval feudalism, emphasized reconciliation with Christian theology and ethics, rather than development. The 16th and 17th century school of Salamanca, credited as the earliest modern school of economics, likewise did not address development specifically. Major European nations in the 17th and 18th century all adopted mercantilist ideals to varying degrees, the influence only ebbing with the 18th century development of physiocrats in France and classical economics in Britain. Mercantilism held that a nation's prosperity depended on its supply of capital, represented by bullion held by the state. It emphasized the maintenance of a high positive trade balance as a means of accumulating this bullion. To achieve a positive trade balance, protectionist measures such as tariffs and subsidies to home industries were advocated. Mercantilist development theory also advocated colonialism. Theorists most associated with mercantilism include Philipp Wilhelm von Hornig, who in his Austria over all, if she only will of 1684 gave the only comprehensive statement of mercantilist theory, emphasizing production in an export-led economy. In France, mercantilist policy is most associated with 17th-century finance minister Jean-Baptiste Colbert, whose policies proved influential in later American development. Mercantilist ideas continue in the theories of economic nationalism and neo-mercantilism. Economic nationalism following mercantilism was the relative theory of economic nationalism, promulgated in the 19th century, related to the development and industrialization of the United States and Germany, notably in the policies of the American system in America and the Zollverein in Germany. A significant difference from mercantilism was the emphasis on colonies, in favor of a focus on domestic production. The names most associated with 19th-century economic nationalism are the American Alexander Hamilton, the German-American Friedrich List, and the American Henry Clay. Hamilton's 1791 Report on Manufactures, his magnum opus, is the founding text of the American system, and drew from the mercantilist economies of Britain under Elizabeth I and France under Colbert. List's 1841 Das nationale System der politischen Ökonomie, which emphasized stages of growth, proved influential in the US and Germany, and nationalist policies were pursued by politician Henry Clay, and later by Abraham Lincoln, under the influence of economist Henry Charles Carey. Forms of economic nationalism and neo-mercantilism have also been key in Japan's development in the 19th and 20th centuries, and the more recent development of the four Asian tigers, and, most significantly, China. Post-World War II theories. The origins of modern development economics are often traced to the need for, and likely problems with, the industrialization of Eastern Europe in the aftermath of World War II. The key authors are Paul Rosenstein Roden, Kurt Mandelbaum, Ragnar Nerks, and Sir Hans Wolfgang Singer. Only after the war did economists turn their concerns towards Asia, Africa and Latin America. At the heart of these studies, by authors such as Simon Kuznets and W. Arthur Lewis, was an analysis of not only economic growth but also structural transformation. Linear stages of growth model. An early theory of development economics. The linear stages of growth model was first formulated in the 1950s by W. Rostow in the Stages of Growth, a non-communist manifesto, following work of Marx and List. This theory modifies Marx's stages theory of development and focuses on the accelerated accumulation of capital, through the utilization of both domestic and international savings as a means of spurring investment, as the primary means of promoting economic growth and, thus, development. The linear stages of growth model posits that there are a series of 5 consecutive stages of development which all countries must go through during the process of development. These stages are the traditional society, the preconditions for takeoff, the drive to maturity, and the age of high mass consumption. Simple versions of the Harrod-Domar model provide a mathematical illustration of the argument that improved capital investment leads to greater economic growth. Such theories have been criticized for not recognizing that, while necessary, capital accumulation is not a sufficient condition for development. That is to say that this early and simplistic theory failed to account for political, social and institutional obstacles to development. Furthermore, this theory was developed in the early years of the Cold War and was largely derived from the successes of the Marshall Plan. This has led to the major criticism that the theory assumes that the conditions found in developing countries are the same as those found in post-World War II Europe. Structural change theory. Structural change theory deals with policies focused on changing the economic structures of developing countries from being composed primarily of subsistence agricultural practices to being their more modern, more urbanized, and more industrially diverse manufacturing and service economy. There are 2 major forms of structural change theory. W. Lewis, a 2-sector surplus model, which views agrarian societies as consisting of large amounts of surplus labor which can be utilized to spur the development of an urbanized, industrial sector, and Hollis Chenery's patterns of development approach, which holds that different countries become wealthy via different trajectories. The pattern that a particular country will follow, in this framework, depends on its size and resources, and potentially other factors including its current income level and comparative advantages relative to other nations. Empirical analysis in this framework studies the sequential process through which the economic, industrial and institutional structure of an underdeveloped economy is transformed over time to permit new industries to replace traditional agriculture as the engine of economic growth. Structural change approaches to development economics have faced criticism for their emphasis on urban development at the expense of rural development, which can lead to a substantial rise in inequality between internal regions of a country. The 2-sector surplus model, which was developed in the 1950s, has been further criticized for its underlying assumption that predominantly agrarian societies suffer from a surplus of labor. Actual empirical studies have shown that such labor surpluses are only seasonal, and drawing such labor to urban areas can result in a collapse of the agricultural sector. The patterns of development approach has been criticized for lacking a theoretical framework. International dependence theory. International dependence theories gained prominence in the 1970s as a reaction to the failure of earlier theories to lead to widespread successes in international development. Unlike earlier theories, International dependence theories have their origins in developing countries and view obstacles to development as being primarily external in nature, rather than internal. These theories view developing countries as being economically and politically dependent on more powerful, developed countries which have an interest in maintaining their dominant position. There are three different, major formulations of international dependence theory: neocolonial dependence theory, the false paradigm model, and the dualistic dependence model. The first formulation of international dependence theory, neocolonial dependence theory, has its origins in Marxism and views the failure of many developing nations to undergo successful development as being the result of the historical development of the international capitalist system. Neoclassical theory first gaining prominence with the rise of several conservative governments in the developed world during the 1980s. Neoclassical theories represent a radical shift away from international dependence theories. Neoclassical theories argue that governments should not intervene in the economy. In other words, these theories are claiming that an unobstructed free market is the best means of inducing rapid and successful development. Competitive free markets unrestrained by excessive government regulation are seen as being able to naturally ensure that the allocation of resources occurs with the greatest efficiency possible and the economic growth is raised and stabilized. It is important to note that there are several different approaches within the realm of neoclassical theory, each with subtle, but important, differences in their views regarding the extent to which the market should be left unregulated. These different takes on neoclassical theory are the free market approach, public choice theory, and the market-friendly approach. Of the three, both the free market approach and public choice theory contend that the market should be totally free, meaning that any intervention by the government is necessarily bad. Public choice theory is arguably the more radical of the two, with its view, closely associated with libertarianism, that governments themselves are rarely good and therefore should be as minimal as possible. Academic economists have given varied policy advice to governments of developing countries. See for example, Economy of Chile, Economic History of Taiwan, and Kruger noted in 1996 that success and failure of policy recommendations worldwide had not consistently been incorporated into prevailing academic writings on trade and development. The market-friendly approach, unlike the other two, is a more recent development and is often associated with the World Bank.